to share our story of overcoming a fear of failure and thus overcoming a fear of starting things.
So today, what if we told you that we wanted to start a business and spend the first 3 years just on research and development without selling a single product?
And what if we also told you that this business we wanted to start, neither of us knew anything about the field. We had no expertise whatsoever.
And what if we added one more thing? What if we added that through our work we decided that this business should actually be a nonprofit?
So how many of you would encourage us to do this? Show of hands, how many people would say go for it? That's good. There are a few people out there who say go for it. That's encouraging.
So we're happy to say that through a series of small mistakes, failures, and pivots, that's exactly what we ended up doing. And today what we want to talk about is why you guys, depending on your circumstances, should consider doing the same thing. You should consider finding success through failure.
Yeah, so about 4.5 years ago, we were sophomore students in engineering. And one of our friends, Jonathan, had this crazy idea. He came to us because he had found out that less than 2% of people in the developing world who've lost a limb have access to the prosthetic care that they need. And John came to us and he said, let's change this, let's solve this. He had that why from that last talk. And he came to us and I guess we were just crazy enough to follow him on this idea. So we set out, the two of us, a few other of our classmates and friends, to try and create an affordable prosthetic arm for the developing world.
Yeah, so we started meeting after class, working on this idea. And the long story short is that in the beginning, we set out just to make a prosthetic arm. But through everything we went through, we ended up making an entire nonprofit organization. And today, what we want to talk about is 5 different mistakes that help lead us from failures to success.
That's you.
It's me?
Yep.
What am I supposed to say? That's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I remember. That's good, thanks. So, the focus of our talk is primarily for university students today. What we want to talk about is particular for university students and all the resources that you guys have, why you should consider going through a process that we've gone through. And too often, risk is discouraged in school, academia, and especially the nonprofit sector. And that really, we find that very discouraging. We find that sort of disappointing. And so what we want to talk about, that risk isn't always a bad thing. And so hopefully you'll get something out of valuable out of this talk and an idea maybe of what you can do yourself. It's you know, no?
No, I think so. What's our first mistake?
Fine, okay. This is going very smooth. All right.
6 mistakes.
So we're going to do 6 mistakes. Exactly. All right, so today we're going to talk about 5 mistakes that led us to success through failure. I'll be better from now on. Mistake number 1, we started in CAD. As engineering students, we're trained in CAD, or computer-aided modeling. This is very easy for engineers to start in, but CAD is really meant for creating sort of intensive computer models, especially before manufacturing. And when we started in this, we were making a prosthetic arm, right? But a prosthetic arm is a very intimate object that you wear on your body. But working in CAD, there's a separation between the object you're designing and the actual product. So what we ended up creating is things like this 3D printed arm that are about 3 to 4 times bigger than anyone's arm. And we actually took this to a meeting with professionals at Northwestern University and showed this to them. And we were lucky that they didn't laugh us out of their office. What we really should have been doing is making things like this Taco Bell 7-Up arm that look, yes, they look ridiculous, but it really allowed us to quickly iterate and test a lot of ideas without spending all that time on the CAD software making these complex models. The mistake here was that our local newspaper published this and said we were making recycled Taco Bell arms for the developing world. The key thing we learned, though, was that we should use prototyping in and of itself as a learning process.
So the second mistake we made is we thought that if we designed this arm, everything else would somehow naturally fall into place. And as a team of mainly engineers when we started, this was a really easy thing for us to do. You know, we thought, hey, we're going to design this awesome technology. It's going to be great. People are going to love it. They're going to want it. It's just going to somehow magically work. And what we didn't realize is that we had to step back and look at the whole picture. We had to take this system level view. And we needed to create things like instruction manuals, training kits. We needed to build relationships with nonprofit partners all over the world. We needed to build the whole system around the arm. So really the lesson here that we learned is while we were so focused on creating this piece of technology, what we really needed to look at is we needed to look at the big picture. You know, in any design process, there's a real back and forth between the technology that you're creating and the whole system. You need to have that back and forth so you actually create some success. So that's something that we had to do to create our organization, to create everything that we do, and it's something that we encourage you to do in your design process.
Mistake number 3. We tried to incorporate as an L3C. Now, an L3C is probably something that none of you guys have heard about. It's a variation of an LLC, or a limited liability company, that looks at triple bottom line. It looks at profits, it looks at social things, and it looks at environmental aspects. And we started in a business incubator. That's really where we started forming and thinking about actually turning our idea, our project, into a business. And we sort of had a lot of peers that were making for-profit businesses in this incubator. And everyone that we presented to, they would give us advice. They saw our entrepreneurial spirit. They saw that we were working on something good. And they were encouraged us to make a for-profit business. Well, we were very, very close to making an L3C. Our lawyer had drafted up the documents. We had set up a meeting to go in and sign everything and incorporate it as an L3C. On our way to this meeting, though, we sort of got in a discussion. We got in an argument. Why should we be an L3C? How are we going to split up stock? How are we going to split up ownership of this company? And we started to realize that really, for what we were trying to do in our mission, a for-profit business wasn't at all the right solution. And so we're happy to say that we ended up actually incorporating as a nonprofit organization. And the lesson there was that, yes, we have to accept advice that people give us, but we're the ones taking the risks, and we're the ones that are becoming the experts in that specific thing that we're trying to do. So we have to accept that advice, but we have to make the decision ourselves.
Yeah, so the fourth mistake is one that we almost made again. It's one that engineers also tend to fall into. We thought that what we should be doing is designing the most affordable product possible. And there's a real problem with this, and it became really clear to us why this was the wrong approach when we took our first trip to Guatemala and worked with our first batch of patients who were giving us feedback and testing our prototypes. So in this picture, you see Santos, who is one of the patients we worked with on that first trip. He's testing out 2 of the prototypes that we had at the time there. Those are really old prototypes. And Santos was giving us some great feedback. Now Santos, he comes from a relatively poor family. His whole family had to come with him that day to bring him to the clinic. And you know, at first glance, you might think that here he's a guy who doesn't have a lot of money. He's missing both of his arms. He would be really appreciative and grateful of what help we could give him, and he was. But what we didn't realize until we met Santos is that Santos is actually studying to become a lawyer. He has a lot of aspirations for himself. We met him, he was actually about 21 years old at the time we met him, which was pretty much how old we were when we were there. His dad was there, his brother were there with him, we talked to them. Santos and his whole family have all these dreams and goals and aspirations. He's more than just a name or a statistic. You know, he's more than just one of that 98% of amputees in the developing world who don't have access to prosthetic care. So there's more here than just designing the most affordable thing possible. One way we look at it is you could say that people who are in a crappy situation don't deserve a crappy product. And we've actually developed a theory around this that we call design towards the 100%. And what that means for us is that we create technology that's designed through the rigors of the developing world context. It's created to be tough enough to work in the developing world. It meets the needs, it's at a low cost. But we design that so that somebody in the US or anywhere in the world, somebody who has lots of money, would even want to purchase it because it's something that's good enough for anybody everywhere. And that's something that we use to passionately drive both our technology and our organization.
So mistake number 5. We didn't know anything about prosthetics, which in actuality wasn't a mistake at all. But when we started, we didn't know anything about prosthetics. None of us were studying prosthetics, and we didn't have an advisor that could really advise us on the situation. And so from the outside, when anyone looks at this, they see this as our biggest weakness. But really, what it gave us was the ability to explore and innovate in a way where people that are experts in the field simply can't. Because when someone's an expert, they know the right way to do it. And for that reason, they can't try something new. But for us, because we didn't know the answers, we didn't know why things were a certain way, we had to explore. We had to find the answers for ourselves. So we didn't know why a thing should be a certain way, until we tried it for ourselves. And the important thing was that we kept trying over and over and over until we figured it out. We had confidence, we had ambition, and we persisted. Right? And so that weakness was actually our biggest strength. And very often when you look at industries, big companies get disrupted in industries. They're very profitable, but they get overthrown by a new business that comes from outside of that industry and completely disrupts what that business is doing.
So when we started 4.5 years ago, if a clinic in the developing world wanted to start providing somebody with prosthetic care, they pretty much had two options. They could build an entire lab, buy a bunch of specialized tools and equipment, they could hire a full-time trained staff that knew how to conduct prosthetic fittings, or the other option was they could raise a bunch of money, put someone who needed a prosthesis on a plane, fly them to the US or another developed country, and then fly them back after they were fit with a custom device. Both of those options are really expensive, time-consuming, and difficult to use. Now, 4.5 years later, we have created a device that we call the open socket, and you can see it being used in this picture. Through all these failures that we had, these mistakes that we made, we were able to achieve this. We have created the open socket, a prosthetic arm that can be fit to a patient in about 30 minutes by someone who only has about 2 hours of training. With that device, someone has the same level of functionality as a custom-fit prosthetic arm, and it can approach the same level of comfort for most patients. And today, there are 55 people using this device in 7 different countries on 3 different continents. And that's something that we're hoping to grow from here. We're hoping to expand that beyond those 55 to hundreds and hundreds more. And that's something that we're excited to be able to do.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, what we want to tell you guys is that we weren't able to achieve this because we were particularly smart, because we had more money than anyone else, because we're particularly different than any of you. We were able to do this because we were ambitious and we were persistent. And we saw these failures, these mistakes that came across our path, instead of as opportunities to give up, as opportunities to learn and try something different. And we're not trying to toot our own horn, we're trying to encourage you guys to try the same thing.
Yeah, so you and I were really not that much different than some of the famous innovators that you know, people like Steve Jobs or Elon Musk or Dean Kamen. People have been known for creating these great innovations. Some of those guys, they might have more money than you, some of them might be smarter than you, some of them might not be as smart as you, but they have one thing that you guys can have too. That is that when they met failure, they saw those failures as opportunities to be better, to learn and to succeed and learn from their mistakes. And that's something that all of us can do. On top of that, this audience, which is mostly university students, you're actually probably in an even better place to create innovation than some of those guys. Think how easily you could put together a team of 5 of the smartest engineers, designers, business people, and so on that you know, and go and tackle a problem and try and make a disruptive change. And think how much that might cost someone like Elon Musk or Dean Kamen.
To date, our organization has spent about $100,000. Imagine if someone like Elon Musk were to hire engineers with $100,000. That would only last, maybe 2 engineers, 1.5 years, not even. They can't cover nearly as much ground that is possible for people in a university setting to cover with that much money. And like Adam said, you have a tremendous amount of resources at your disposal that you probably aren't taking advantage of.
Yeah, so we really encourage you to take advantage of these things. And the key thing here is that none of what we're saying here is really new. Thomas Edison said that when he came up with a way to make a light bulb, he actually came up with 1,000 ways not to make a light bulb. So we're not proposing a new idea here. We're sharing our story, not because we want to toot our own horn, but because we want to encourage you guys and use it as a point of encouragement that you can go out and take chances and start things like this.
So don't let yourself make excuses. Don't let yourself be the obstacle in your path. Every time you overcome a challenge, or what seems to be like a failure, you'll gain more and more confidence to take on even bigger and bigger challenges. And to quote Miss Frizzle from the Magic School Bus, take chances, make mistakes, and get messy.